Picture this for a second. You wake up, get dressed, and head down to the local market just to buy a basic loaf of bread. You reach into your pocket, pull out this massive, heavy stack of cash, and you suddenly realize a completely terrifying truth. The money in your hands is, quite literally, worth less than the paper it's actually printed on. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the absolute most shocking economic collapse stories in modern history. We're looking at exactly how a nation entirely destroyed its own currency, and what happened to the millions of everyday people caught right in the middle of the fallout.
Crazy, right? But here's the thing. That scenario I just described, it wasn't a metaphor, and it definitely wasn't a bad dream. In Zimbabwe, back in 2008, this surreal, completely upside-down reality was basically just a Tuesday. People were abruptly forced to navigate an economy where the entire fundamental concept of value had just evaporated overnight. We're talking about millions of ordinary people, people who had done absolutely nothing wrong, finding themselves trapped in a terrifying financial freefall with literally no way out.
I want you to really think about that for a moment. What actually happens when money loses its meaning entirely? I mean, we rely on it every single day, right? We trust it, we trade our precious time and labor for it. But what exactly happens when that silent social contract just completely shatters? Well, to really grasp the sheer magnitude of what happened in 2008, we have to rewind the clock a bit. We need to go back and see how this disaster actually started, because the contrast, it's absolutely staggering.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline, because it honestly defies all economic logic. Back in 1980, Zimbabwe had just won its independence. The whole world was watching, and their currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, was incredibly strong. To put that into perspective, one Zimbabwean dollar could actually buy more than one US dollar. Let that sink in for a second. Now fast forward, by 2008, a single banknote for 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars couldn't even buy a single loaf of bread. Seriously, how does a nation fall so far and so incredibly fast?
You see, for a brief moment in 1980, Zimbabwe looked like an absolute slam-dunk success story. The potential was off the charts. The nation was blessed with some of the absolute most fertile agricultural land on the entire continent. Beneath the soil, it sat on a massive wealth of rich minerals. And honestly, just as importantly, it boasted one of the highest literacy rates in all of Africa. The foundational elements for a prosperous, thriving nation, they were all right there. They were globally known as a true beacon of potential.
So the crisis really started brewing in the late 1990s. President Robert Mugabe was losing political support as elections were coming up. So, to win back the people, he makes this pivotal policy decision: seize farmland from white farmers and redistribute it to black Zimbabweans. Now, on paper, this was presented as justice, but in practice, it triggered a textbook, devastating economic domino effect. See, the farmers who were removed had spent decades building these highly complex irrigation systems and managing the soil to produce food for the entire country. The people who were handed the land, they had basically no farming experience, no equipment, and no training. Within just 2 years, a country famously known as the breadbasket of Africa totally crashed to the point of importing the very food it could no longer grow. Naturally, foreign investors panicked and fled. International sanctions hit the country hard. And, facing a massive deficit, the government did the one thing that always makes a bad economic situation infinitely worse. They fired up the printing presses.
At first, printing more money probably seemed like a kind of manageable reaction, just a way to pay the government's bills. Inflation hit 50%. And yeah, while 50% is definitely painful, it's a number an economy can technically still limp along under, even with massive strain. But the government just kept printing. And here is the fatal mathematical flaw of printing fiat currency. Every single new bill you print mathematically and instantly steals value from every existing bill already sitting in your wallet.
So as they printed more cash to keep up with the rising costs, the costs rose even faster, exactly because they were printing more cash. It is a terrifying, inescapable feedback loop. By 2007, this compounding chaos hit a staggering 66,000% inflation. Just imagine that for a second. Imagine your rent, your groceries, the gas for your car costing 66,000% more than they did just a short time ago. The paper currency was literally bleeding value by the minute.
But the presses didn't stop. There was no stopping them. The government kept trying to outprint the crisis. By mid-2008, the inflation rate shot up to an unbelievable 11 million%. 11 million! the velocity of money just went completely out of control. Citizens were literally sprinting to spend whatever cash they had the absolute second it touched their hands. Because honestly, holding on to it for even an hour meant you were taking a massive loss in purchasing power.
And this brilliantly illustrates the total, utter collapse of the system by November 2008, culminating in an official inflation rate of 89.76 dillion%. That is, an 89 followed by 21 zeros. I mean, it's a number that simply doesn't feel real, does it? It belongs in astrophysics, not in a conversation about economics. But this was the harsh mathematical reality of a country that had completely, utterly destroyed the value of its own currency.
And the physical, tangible result of that staggering math, the $100 trillion note, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, in this incredibly desperate attempt to keep cash moving around, literally began printing a single piece of paper with 100 trillion stamped right across it. And yet the absolute sheer absurdity of the whole shebang was that carrying this astronomically high denomination into a local store still wasn't enough to buy your family a basic loaf of bread. No way.
You really have to imagine the daily logistical nightmare of living in this hyper-inflated society. It was absolutely staggering. Everyday citizens literally required actual wheelbarrows full of cash just to run to the bank or the market. People would line up for groceries, and by the time they reached the front of the line just a few hours later, the prices had already doubled. Companies had to scrap and change their entire payroll systems. Salaries couldn't be paid monthly anymore. Actually, scratch that, they couldn't even be paid weekly. They had to be paid daily. Because if you waited until tomorrow to get paid, yesterday's wages would be worth half of what they were.
So the crucial point is, behind all of these mind-bending statistics and endless zeros were real, everyday people, people whose lives were just suddenly thrown into absolute, total chaos. A schoolteacher named Gideon, who had dutifully worked for 30 years, watched his entire life savings become completely worthless in a single month. A desperate mother spent her morning trading her last precious piece of jewelry, not to build wealth, but just to get enough food to feed her children for one single day. A young man literally did the math and figured out that it was actually cheaper to use stacks of Zimbabwean banknotes as fuel for his fire than to take those notes to the market and buy actual firewood. The money hadn't just lost its value, it had completely, totally lost its meaning.
Eventually, the citizens just completely stopped trusting the banks. They stopped trusting the government. They started trading exclusively on the black market using South African rand, US dollars, basically anything that wasn't printed by their own government. And so in 2009, Zimbabwe did something that almost no country in history has ever done voluntarily. Just to simply survive, they officially abandoned their dead currency. The Zimbabwean dollar was officially laid to rest, and the country adopted foreign currencies like the US dollar and the South African rand.
You know, billions of people around the world carry paper money or digital balances every single day, without ever stopping to ask, what actually makes this worth anything at all? Well, the entire lesson of this massive collapse boils down to one single word: trust. Nothing more, nothing less. When a government destroys that trust, whether through corruption, through recklessness, or just by blindly printing money it simply does not have, the paper in your pocket doesn't just dip a little in value. It can become absolutely worthless overnight. And honestly, the cruelest part of Zimbabwe's story is that the people who were hurt the absolute most were the everyday citizens who believed in the system the longest.
Zimbabwe's story is a massive, incredible tragedy, but more importantly, it is a glaring neon sign warning. It's a warning that has been stubbornly ignored by governments throughout history, both before Zimbabwe and since. The big question is not whether a sextillion% collapse can happen again. The real question is, where will it happen next? Well, thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If this story made you think, if it shocked you even a little bit, then you already know this channel is different. We really try to find the stories hiding behind the numbers, the real ones that change the world. If you want more efficient, structured learning like this, definitely hit subscribe. And if this gave you a brand new perspective or just a story worth sharing, give the video a like. It really helps more focused learners find content exactly like this. Until next time, keep questioning the numbers.